Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny could go down as one of the biggest cinematic flops of all time. Yes, it's making more money than many movies ever have, but ticket prices also are well through the roof. And on top of that, we are now finding out that Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny, Harrison Ford's swan song as the swashbuckling archaeologist, is likely to make less money than the entire production budget alone, not including marketing. Iger's back as the CEO. Is he here to take out people like Kathleen Kennedy, who are producing nothing but failure? All right, folks, welcome back to a video of excellence here on the WDW Pro channel. You expect nothing less, nothing more. You expect exactly that, and that is what we intend to provide today. Joining me for this major discussion, we have a robust roundtable of experts: Valiant Renegade, Lauren Connor, Jonas J. Campbell, and Tommy Tables, all here to help us dissect the situation at Lucasfilm and to cover this topic, which, by the way, there's a video on Valiant Renegade's channel today all about the Iger situation, but covering this from the viewpoint that now that Iger is back for an extended period, he has to deal with Kathleen Kennedy. What is he going to do? We begin with an article out of Forbes by Mark Hughes titled "Indiana Jones Destined for Franchise Worst $300 Million Worldwide Gross." Folks, as we consider that, remember, that's not even adjusted for inflation. This is the worst, period. Disney faces its fourth theatrical misfire of 2023 after Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny topped a mere $248 million in total global receipts from 2 weekends of theatrical release. This disastrous outcome means the film is likely destined for a franchise worst $300 million plus or minus worldwide gross. Well, folks, that is gross indeed. No good to have Indy sitting down that low. Now, let's go to the panel before we continue with this issue. I want to hand it over to Valiant Renegade first. Valiant, Bob Iger's back in town. He's staying in town. He is not riding off on the horse that brought him in, and he's going to have to deal with Kathleen Kennedy. We are now facing a franchise worst $300 million for Indiana Jones, and that has fully exposed Lucasfilm. At the same time, Star Wars is in, well, the worst situation I've ever seen it be in. The Ahsoka trailer is being absolutely mauled online. No one wants to see that, relatively. So, Valiant, does Iger have to deal now with a Kathleen Kennedy who has on her resume one of the worst flops of all time?
Well, ultimately, it all comes back to Bob Iger. All of this is Bob Iger's failures over the years that he is now going to have to contend with. He is going to have to do something to either just relish in it or correct it. Kathleen Kennedy and Lucasfilm, probably the worst black eye, because even though the recent failures of things like Marvel and Pixar are ugly as sin, they have had a tremendous degree of success up until recent years, since, of course, Bob Iger ran off some of the folks that I think kept those two studios working at the degree of efficiency that they were. Lucasfilm, on the other hand, has really not had any success outside of the first Star Wars movie since Disney took it over, which was The Force Awakens. After that, it's going precipitously downhill. And we've all lamented Kathleen Kennedy being renewed time and time again. I don't think her renewal in 2018 was of any particular surprise. They were still in the middle of creating that sequel trilogy for Disney. You don't rock the boat in the middle of that. 2021 was kind of the real heartbreak, because at that point things had been broken so badly that she should have been shown the door, but yet she was allowed to remain. Now here we are in the final vestige of Lucasfilm. The final piece of the financial puzzle that you paid $4 billion for has been spent, and that is Indiana Jones. And it is an unmitigated disaster at the box office, and there's no financial life for it after it leaves, at least not any financial life of any note. So what do you do at this point? You have basically a dead studio where everything has been blown, and the only thing you can really do now is generate more mediocre at best Star Wars content. Do you really need to keep Kathleen Kennedy around for that? No, you don't. The woman is 70 years old. You have reported, as have some Hollywood trades, that her contract is likely going to begin renegotiation next month in August, ahead of its natural expiration at the end of September next year in 2024. I think that Kathleen Kennedy will be gracefully exited from Disney with all the accolades. She'll probably be on stage at the Oscars next year receiving a Lifetime Achievement Award, as she is being set up for retirement sometime in the third quarter of next year.
Well, let's go to Lorne then, because Lorne, you have no love lost for Kathleen Kennedy, I would say. We just watched the Ahsoka trailer come out. We've done some coverage of that. We are paying very close attention to some recent leaks that we're getting out of Lucasfilm in regards to what may be happening behind the scenes with Kathleen Kennedy. My concern here is that based on what we've seen at the box office now, Lucasfilm is fully exposed. They can no longer hide behind the narrative that, oh, the Star Wars movies made money. Indiana Jones, Solo, a Star Wars story, The Rise of Palpatine, all of these films have been horrendous. Don't forget about Willow and what it did to the reputation of the studio. Seems to me that Ahsoka is going all in on the Force's female trope. It also seems to me that it ties in directly probably to the Rey movie and to the Mandoverse movie, clearly. Now, you might say, well, why does it tie in directly to the Rey movie? And I've done some thinking on this today. I don't see a way for it not to tie into the Rey movie, because Rey is supposed to be starting a new Jedi Order. What Dave Filoni is doing is he's creating so many Jedi that existed, apparently, right on through Order 66. You know, they just kept on going. And so I don't see any way to not touch on that with the Rey movie, that, hey, we got 100 female Jedi running around everywhere over here under Ahsoka Tano. So, Lorne, how much damage is being done creatively? And do you think that this $300 million indie box office failure is enough to get her out the door and stop the bleeding?
Well, I think the damage that's been done is incalculable. I don't think that there's any way to really measure the damage that's been done to Star Wars, at least. Is the $300 million loss on Indy enough to get her out the door? I don't think she'll be hoisted on, by her own petard, if that's what you're asking. I think it's like Valiant says. She'll serve out the end of her contract. And the reason that I think that is because there's no advantage to firing her now. In fact, there's a lot of downsides to firing her now. She can't get anything out the door in the next year, so she can't do any more damage. And if you tried to buy her out of her contract, it's only going to cost you and potentially rock the market. So that's why my analysis has been that they'll probably go for Pixar, because you can sell that to investors as, well, we have redundancies here. We can consolidate these studios. We can have some layoffs for redundant personnel, and that's something that investors can swallow. There's a story there to be told. All you do by firing Kathleen is make investors nervous, and that would directly go to the stock price. I do want to touch a little bit on what you were saying about both the Jedi, Rey starting a new Jedi Order, as well as all of these Jedi running around after Order 66. Let's start with that last one first.
Please.
That was a problem in the old EU as well. There were just dozens of Jedi that survived Order 66 in the old EU. So while it does get ridiculous after a certain point, it's also not something that hasn't been done before, and the fan base will swallow it if you have good characters. I did listen to your video earlier today where you were discussing a little bit of this with Ahsoka and what's going to be done with the Rey movie potentially. I kind of disagree that they're going to start a new Jedi Order. I think they're wanting to get away from the term Jedi entirely. I think they want to create a new order that will be called something else. And I think part of the problem with that is that they are pushing the Force's female narrative.
Lord, that's so bad, and yet you're so right. That is amazingly bad, and yet you have convinced me that you must be right simply based on how bad that would be to get rid of the Jedi name to go to something else.
I think it's also important to point out that Lauren agrees with what I said during that video, is that they are going to start a new marketing arm off of the idea that Ahsoka has her own order.
Well, I think part of the reason that you do it is because I'm guessing that their reflexive hatred of the Jedi Order is because of how they were portrayed in the prequels. They see them as baby stealers. And I don't think they found a way that they can be comfortable with that idea. And it's almost like there's a blind spot there. I think if you think of a movie like Firestarter or something like that, there's a reason why you don't necessarily want untrained people with psychokinetic powers running around, because that's probably going to lead to all kinds of problems. So they developed this order to try and create the discipline necessary to be able to control the power in a responsible way. But no matter how you try and dress it up out of the prequel era, they still look like baby stealers. So you need to have a matriarchal force that is going to shelter and take care of these babies in a way that is not dogmatically forcing them to be warriors. And that's not the Jedi way. So it has to be a new order.
So it could be the Zedi way, perhaps.
There you go.
The Zedi.
Everybody wants a baby
tonight,
Jedi.
Let me tell you. That's right. Now, let's do a clarification, though, real quick. So Indiana Jones, Dial of Destiny, probably going to wind up with $300 million made. But according to my calculations, and you tell me if I'm wrong on this, probably losing somewhere in the realm of $350 to $400 million. That sound about right to you based on what we're getting?
Well, of course, it ultimately depends where it winds up. I think 300 million may be a smidge low. I see it getting a little bit higher than that, although not much. I'm thinking like 325 is where my mind is, and that's only because we look at what happened last week. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny over its entire 7-day run from day 4, which was the first Monday, all the way through day 10, which was the Sunday that just passed. It hauled in about $56 million internationally for the whole week. So I think that'll be somewhere in the order of 20 to 25 million that will be added into that international figure come this Sunday. They're expecting another 14 million this weekend domestically. Of course, it's still clipping around $3 million. You saw what happened today. It's in 4th place behind Mission Impossible, Insidious, Sound of Freedom. Yeah, I mean it's a mess for them, but they're still pulling in around 3 million.
4th place it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, so that's why I think by Sunday this week, it's probably going to be, close enough to where 300 million is going to be on the table, and then it's going to trickle up from there for the next 3 to 4 weeks. It's still going to linger in theaters. I think it'll find its way up to 325, although it's going to creep there very slowly. But yeah, it's in the realm. But I mean, at that rate, you're looking at somewhere around a $250 million loss is what I'm looking at. I mean, if they really only spent $100 million on marketing and $350 on production,
I have a hard time believing the $100 million only.
I said the same thing, but Deadline tends to be pretty good with those numbers. And if they said that they spent about $100 million on marketing, I'm going to go with it. And again, I think it makes sense because, as I stated before, I do believe that once Disney saw how badly the reception was at its premiere in France and the reviews that came out from there, and of course, once they saw what ticket pre-sales and everything were starting a month out from its release, they probably adjusted that spend accordingly. I think up front they had fully intended to spend at least $150 million like they would on a Marvel film. But I think once they saw what was happening with this movie leading up, because most of that marketing spend typically tends to come in around, the final 2 weeks to 1 week before release, I think they pulled back on it. I think, again, I can't guarantee it, but I can totally believe that figure that Deadline put out. So.
And to be fair,
Jonas Kathleen Kennedy,
a very expensive location.
Well, Jonas Kathleen Kennedy famously put out that they enjoyed releasing Star Wars content onto Disney Plus because it didn't expose them to quite so much criticism, and it allowed them to hide the numbers a little bit. After we've seen this out of Indiana Jones and Dial of Destiny, can Disney afford to let Lucasfilm, as it is currently constituted, produce a Rey movie or a Mandoverse movie that could lose these sorts of numbers? Is it now time to officially pull the plug on these things and go back to the drawing board?
No, I don't think they've even really gotten started on that Ray movie. And I think that there's a strong chance that Bob Iger will be heavily involved in whatever happens with that movie in the same way that he was involved with Force Awakens. I think by the time that movie comes out, which now Bob Iger will be there for when it releases, if it releases in 2026, according to, I believe that's the current schedule. If it's a Force Awakens situation, like where Bob Iger basically insisted that J.J. Abrams come in and make this film, then it has a high chance of actually being a quality product because he is a Hollywood executive and he does have the influence that he needs to get the right talent in there. It will go back to being a focus brand because it has to save Lucasfilm at this point. I think if they don't, and they've got a lot of runway between here and there to find out if they can right the ship as far as the budgets being commensurate with the box office. So I don't see this one as a problem. Now, all of those Disney Plus shows like Andor season 2 and Skeleton Crew and Acolyte, that's going to teach them a completely different lesson here. Not to bring Marvel into it, but there was a major reveal on an episode of Secret Invasion where I'm not going to spoil it, but also I know no one's watching it. This is an earth-shaking thing that happened in the MCU, and no one is talking about it because obviously no one is watching the show. If those are the kind of numbers that Disney Plus is pulling in on a flagship brand, I don't see how Star Wars has any hope. I don't see Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny doing well on Disney Plus. I guess maybe it'll get a bump from the I'm not paying money to see this in theaters crowd. But here's the thing. I haven't heard a single person say I'm not paying money so that I can then go see it on Disney Plus. There's no I'm going to wait crowd. It is either I'm going to see this movie or I have zero interest in seeing this movie. I'm not seeing much in between.
It's like Nedry in Jurassic Park. Nobody cares.
See, nobody cares. Also, Lauren, I wanted to disagree with you. I don't think Kathleen Kennedy even owns a petard.
Well, I think she's maybe got some of them employed in the story group.
Oh, boy.
Oh! Well, let me say this. On the Marvel side of things, it does seem like at least the lights are flashing red, and the Marvel folks have got the idea that, hey, we need to change course immediately. I don't know if you guys have seen some of the images of Deadpool under production, but that is the most fun I think I have ever seen two actors having, with Ryan Reynolds and Hugh Jackman in their costumes going at it. Their families are on set. They're hugging. They're having fun. Their smiles in between each take. It's very impressive. And so, it's the dead opposite from what we see out of Lucasfilm. And as you accurately portray, Jonas, it is the opposite of what we've seen out of recent Marvel material. Perhaps they are beginning to right the ship. Perhaps Ryan Reynolds can show them the way. Tommy, speaking about productions that are no fun, though, when it comes to Indiana Jones, the Dial of Destiny, and this major flop that it is, I'm curious, who do you think walks away most damaged from this? Clearly, Kathleen Kennedy is at the end of her career. John Williams, did a fantastic job composing it. No complaints out of me for the music. Harrison Ford is done. I mean, he's what, 81 years old. So who really walks away damaged and will have a harder time because of this film?
Well, I think that's a really good question, and it's one that would be very difficult to answer. I mean, even as you've alluded to in your previous videos, there's quite a lot of debate going on about who actually will be taking the blame for this movie and the failure that it has occurred. And I think at least the only sort of consensus is that the movie is a failure. Going back to the original point and Valiant's point about this being maybe getting 300 million or 325 worldwide, even that is a bit deceptive, I suppose, because of the fact that when you're looking, like, obviously you're not getting as much from the worldwide grosses as you would from the domestic grosses. So the losses, taking that into account, might be even more. But to answer your question about who gets damaged the most, James Mangold, I think. I have a feeling that he might be the one.
Well, that's what I was curious about. Is it him or is it Phoebe Waller-Bridge? It seems it's in the running for one of those two.
It could very well be, but I mean, I think if anyone has a petard, it'll be James Mangold that's falling on it.
Yeah, I would agree with that because Phoebe Waller-Bridge already has her next contract with Netflix. By the time she's negotiating, not with Netflix, with Amazon for, she's got her hands all over the Tomb Raider reboot that's here. James Mangold's next project is at Lucasfilm, so there's no getting away from this one.
No, it's
well,
not.
if we are to believe, right? Exactly, Lauren. If we are to believe. Well, so there is nothing good coming out of Indiana Jones: The Dial of Destiny. If you look at the percentage drop in terms of audience versus the standard indie films, so the first four, let's say, although the first three I think are better indicators of Indiana Jones, but based on what I'm looking at with the change in ticket prices over the years, this film is pulling something like 20% of the usual audience. Now, that is in line with Disney having lost apparently about 70% of their box office revenue from 2019 until today. That's hard to believe, but it seems to be the case. Let's go around the table one last time, starting with Valiant Renegade. What is going to be the result of this? We're seeing a catastrophic collapse in box office revenues for Disney. Yes, they continue to lead at the box office, but they only lead at the box office because of girth. They're putting out so many movies that make decent amount of money, but at the same time, so many of those films are losing that Valiant, how much money has Disney lost in the last little while?
Are we going to include Indiana Jones or not?
It depends. We should, and we might even project onto the Marvels.
Well, let's go with that then. So before Indiana Jones came out, the TTM, the trailing 12-month, was about an $890 million loss for those movies, beginning with Lightyear.
Does that include the Multiverse of Madness update?
That was before Lightyear. So no, I didn't include that in the original calculation. We can go back to that one, but that's a different story. But going with Lightyear from June of last year through June of this year, which Indiana Jones released in June, add another 250 to that. So we're getting close to that $1.2 billion mark at this point. And yes, we can talk about market share all we want, but it doesn't matter. The thing is, as I said before, everything that Disney puts out is a $200+ million tentpole production. No other studio does this. Universal doesn't do this. Paramount doesn't do this. Sony doesn't do this. They might have one or two major tentpole pictures per year with a plethora of other, $50 million, $10 million, $20 million, maybe $85 or $90 million movies that come out. And then they have big lucrative contracts after these things leave the theater. Disney doesn't do any of this. Disney throws everything into every production, and they just continue to fail at this point. And as far as the ramifications, we should be past the point of there being any question that on this next earnings call, this is a topic that must be brought up by the investors and the analysts from the institutional firms that call in during the Q&A. This has to be brought up. If it's not, it's. Does
this decimate the sequel argument?
The sequel argument in terms of.
So we've heard Disney say repeatedly that we have to get back to IP that's well known. Like we've got to do Frozen 3. We've got to go back to Toy Story.
Yeah.
Well, they went with Indiana Jones. We can go back and we can retrofit the argument and say, well, Indy was old and nobody was ever going to watch Indy anyway. That's not what they thought. They thought this was one of the most popular franchises on planet Earth. And that did not save the box office here.
If they go back and they make a Toy Story 5 that is in line with original Toy Story films, then it could be a big success. If they go back and make Frozen 3 in the same vein that they made Frozen, with the same caliber of storytelling, the same quality of music, and that was the big thing that made Frozen, right, was the music. If they do that again, then they can have a win. But Disney has a habit of not doing that. They take a former IP and then they change it for modern audiences. So if they do Frozen 3 and they have, for example, Lin-Manuel Miranda come in and write all the music, they're screwed.
Yeah,
it's a great point, especially after
Little Mermaid.
What's the name of the song? What's the name of the song though that's just so terrible?
Aquafina farts in a microphone.
The scuttlebutt.
Yes.
Yes, exactly. The scuttlebutt. God, that's so terrible. So, Lauren, if Kathleen Kennedy is actually gone before these films hit, okay, so let's say that she runs her contract out. That would take us into third quarter of 2024, which, by the way, is when I have said she will leave consistently now for years and years. But, Lauren, if she's gone before those movies come out, do you trust Dave Filoni now to be the overseer of Rey of the Mandoverse movie, or does Lucasfilm need a wholesale switch?
It's a tough question to answer when asked that way, because I would have said before the Ahsoka trailer yesterday there was at least a chance. I don't believe Filoni is as good as his most loyal followers would say he is. I also don't believe he's as bad as his worst detractors say that he is.
Right.
I think that there are times when Filoni's been brilliant. There's also been times when I'm wondering, what in the world are you doing, Dave? I think most of all, he's a guy that is going to protect his own job. And if somebody gives him a directive, he's going to follow it. So you could get something decent if there was somebody that was not handing him a directive that said, you must do this. On the other hand, I did see that Ahsoka trailer. He's never the guy that I've necessarily wanted to be in charge of all the storytelling at Lucasfilm. I think that he does well sometimes. Favreau was the guy I put my faith in. I'm real curious to see, if we ever find out, how involved Favreau actually was in Mando Season 3 and the Book of Boba Fett. His name's on it. To me, it doesn't ring true that it's him. Now, there are people that point to Iron Man 2. I have a different view on Iron Man 2 than a lot of people had. I always thought it was a good movie. I still, to this day, think it's a good movie. But, even if you don't, everybody has a bad day sometimes. To me, Season 3 did not read like Favreau. Something happened there. So I guess it all depends. I don't know that Star Wars is rescuable at this point.
Well, all right. Well, we'll go from there and try to still gain some positivity. Watch what I do right now. Let's do this to Tommy, and then Jonas, you're going to get the final word on this video. But
I
Tommy,
love Iron Man 2. I love Iron Man 2. I'm just throwing that out there.
Tommy, Kathleen Kennedy likely to leave in the next year. I believe that to be true at this point. I don't think that's any kind of conspiracy or crazy rumor now. In her legacy, what is there that is positive?
Wow.
I'm so sorry to do this to you.
That's okay.
Tommy.
I think you need a shot of scotch before I answer this one. Well, I think what's positive is that she's helped. You know what? I'm actually gonna flip this around, and I'm gonna say that perhaps what's positive is that she still hasn't touched two of the last Lucasfilm IPs, which would be American Graffiti and Monkey Island. Now, whether or not she gets to those before she leaves is another question, but I hope not.
Look at Lauren, the terror in his face that she might get to Monkey Island. I thought, Tommy, you were going to say that the positive out of her legacy is she made George look so good, so good.
It's probably that she got the dog and not the girl.
Well, Jonas, she hasn't got Day of the Tentacle either. There are a few things left that she has managed not to utterly destroy. But Jonas, final thoughts on Indiana Jones, The Dial of Destiny, one of the worst flops in all of cinema history. What do you make of where this goes?
I think it is a fitting end to a bad tenure. I don't know her as a person, but I think it'll be a good thing for everyone, for Kathleen Kennedy to move on from Lucasfilm. I don't see anything positive coming out of this one, and they will be lucky if the agreements with Paramount allow them to put this in a box set with the other Indiana Jones films, because that's the only way I see this thing having any kind of life on physical media, which is the only place left that it can make any money with a reasonable audience.
I don't know what you could do to redeem this film, or
I'll also add, in listening to what VR was saying, maybe Disney just got confused, and they saw so much success with that Disney Plus loss leader model that they just decided to try it at the box office for a couple of years.
Well played all. Well, folks, it's been a fantastic conversation about what is just something unforeseeable 10 years ago. It's hard to believe that an Indiana Jones film could now sit as one of the biggest flops of all time, but that will never diminish the fact that Raiders of the Lost Ark is perhaps one of the greatest films of all time, perhaps a perfect film. It doesn't take away that Temple of Doom is just a joyous film filled with monkey brains and all kinds of things that should never be in a film that children watch, and yet I'm happily scarred from it. And it certainly does not change the father-son dynamic out of The Last Crusade and one of the greatest finales ever in a film, in a trilogy. Indiana Jones and the films that constituted those first three, they live forever. And we celebrate that. We celebrate the people who made those films. It sucks to watch our heroes go through what we've seen with this latest one, but perhaps Kathleen Kennedy will move on and be more successful in something else. I don't know if it's knitting, crochet, coffee, I don't care, but I wish her well, just not at Lucasfilm. All right, folks, if you enjoy content like this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and when you click it, you stick it to the algorithms. It is the notification bell. The conversation here comes to a conclusion, but the commentary begins right now. Drop a comment down below. We care about what you think. We covet your comments. And folks, wherever you are, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.
Make sure to catch The Pro Show Thursdays 5 to 7 Eastern Time. Entertainment Explained, The Culture Curve Conquered, live with Pro and all his friends.